Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to the course code ENG 455, lecture number 31. As you can see, the topic of discussion today is discourse and discourse analysis. We have dealt with some aspects of discourse analysis while having our lectures on pragmatic. But this lecture is primarily based and totally based on discourse and discourse analysis. So before starting with what discourse analysis is, how we analyze discourses, we need to know what a discourse is. And why we need to do this, to perform this discourse analysis. So all of these things would be discussed today. So the outline of our topic today would be that at initial level we will discuss what is discourse. We will talk about the different definitions of discourse and their ideas which are contained in these definitions, and the things which refute or accept different ideas within these definitions. After these definitions of these discourse words, we will be actually concerned with discourse analysis. Doing discourse analysis means how to do discourse analysis, and with doing discourse analysis we will divide that part into our scope, the scope of doing discourse analysis, the influences of on doing discourse analysis, and finally the different approaches towards the discourse analysis that would tell us that how to do discourse analysis with respect to different areas of knowledge or different fields of knowledge. So let's start with discourse analysis. What is a discourse? Before that, why discourse need to be analyzed? According to linguists or researchers or critics, the meaning that there are different things inside a language that happen primarily in language. Means so many things happen primarily within the language. Why we need use language? We use language for different purposes. For example, for saying something like making promise, I will never disobey you. Making a promise, I'm telling my parents, I'm saying something to my parents. And coming to dinner, okay, I will come to dinner tonight. So they saying certain thing, or to say something like telling someone you love them, telling my children, okay, I love you, I love you, my sons, I love you, my daughters. So this thing so language is used to perform several functions, or indeed talking to the dog, or even to the pet dog at my home, playing with him and talking to him, oh Tom, come here. Now the dog is definitely not having that language, but still he would come there. And I am using that language to communicate with that pet animal as well. So language does so many things. And when language does so many things, it is a need to be analyzed. That is the need for discourse analysis. That we need to analyze our discourses, because with the help of language discourse, we used to say so many things. And to realize their meanings, it is important to analyze discourses. So now move towards what is a discourse. Discourse is language above the sentences or above the clauses. It is usually what happens before this era of discourse analysis, before the people, the linguists, the researchers, the literary critics, they started analyzing discourses. The trend was to analyze sentences or clauses. The basic tenet of linguistics, the basic approach in linguistics, they were used to analyze sentences and clauses. If you remember, in syntactic analysis, we were supposed to perform the syntactic analysis of sentences. So for a certain period of time, only the sentences, clauses and phrases are of the importance while analyzing language. 1960s grammarians became convinced of the individual usefulness of considering stretches longer than individual sentences in their analysis. But after 1960s, the grammarians, the linguists, they became interested. They considered that sometimes the whole meaning is not conveyed in one single sentence. Within a piece of text, the meanings are conveyed with the help of 2, 3, 4 sentences. So only the analysis of sentences is not enough. we need to perform analysis above the sentences level, and that was realized in 1960s. As I told you before, that only the sentence level analysis or the clause level analysis was considered enough, but after that the people thought that sometimes the meanings emerge after reading 2, 3, 4 sentences, or sometimes the meanings emerge even after reading the whole paragraph. So what about them? We need to analyze then beyond sentences, beyond clauses. And then the terms were introduced like text linguistics and discourse analysis. Now the text, initially text linguistics focusing the language of the text, discourse analysis analyzing the language of the discourse. It emerges to mean two different fields. What was the reason? The reason was these early linguists, these traditional, the beginning, in the beginning era of this analysis, the linguists, they considered text and discourse as something different. For them, text was something written, and discourse means something in spoken language. And still right now, till we have this problem that the people, they consider text as a written form of language and discourse as the oral form of language. But there is actually no difference. Whether it is a spoken form of language, whether it is a written form of language, it is a text, it is a discourse. The discourse and text means the same thing. And that's why we will use throughout this presentation today, when we'll be talking about discourse analysis, it means the same thing, the text analysis or textual analysis, analyzing the language of the text. The only difference is that when I talk about the textual analysis, it does mean the language of the text. So discourse and text, they are both same thing, because the basic purpose of analysis is to check the language, whether to check the language of a written text, whether to check the language of a spoken text. That is a text, and that is a discourse, and that would be treated as discourse and text in similar meanings throughout this work. So we will now talk about discourse analysis. But remember, discourse means the text, the language of the text. So when I say discourse, it means the discourse in oral form, discourse in written form. Both forms are accepted. So now we will talk about different definitions of discourse analysis. Number one definition, the very first definition of discourse. It divides discourse as into two elements. Discourse in structure, discourse as function. What is the structure of discourse? A particular unit of language, that is a discourse. And what is the structure of discourse? What formulates a structure? And then a particular focus on language, that how this discourse, it serves the functions. So now we will divide these two parts. We will analyze this definition further into two parts. First, by focusing on discourse in structure, and then focusing on discourse as function. Discourse as structure. When we talk about the structure of the discourse, what is the problem? You can have a unit which looks like a sentence but doesn't mean anything. The issue arises with focusing on that if we consider, okay, what is a discourse? Discourse has something which has a proper structure, a grammatical structure. If we accept discourse with that definition of grammatical structure, then the problem is that sometimes it happens that a discourse is perfectly following the grammatical rules. The sentence is perfectly created to create a sentence, grammatically perfect sentence, but it does not mean anything. The problem gets with its meaning. Again, give you that example of Chomsky's famous sentence, colorless green ideas sleep furiously. Perfect grammatical sentence. Adjectives with a noun at the place of subject, then sleep as a verb, furiously as adverb, a perfect grammatical sentence. But the issue is this sentence does not have any meaning. If we check the semanticity, at semantic level, there is no meaning that arises out of these words. And another issue is that, on the other hand, the units in which people speak do not always look like sentences. Definitely when we are focusing on the discourses and as spoken form. So what happens, the people while speaking, they do not follow the perfect grammatical pattern. They need to speak freely. They need to omit certain things out of their speech. They try to talk about, to focus on the major thing, mean the careless speech patterns often we observe. The people who are very conscious about language, only they speak perfectly. Otherwise, majority of the people, they are just trying to communicate in their own style, in their own way, sometimes totally grammatically free type of language. For example, if you read this whole paragraph below, you can run a how, watch, now watch, you can run a house, you can run a house and do the job, which is important. Can't why a man can't do it himself and a woman can't do it himself. If you want to be successful in most cases, now think a person is communicating in your try it. Just take a short interview. Ask somebody person that I'm going to take a short oral interview from you. Okay, tell me about this issue. What do you think about the responsibilities of men and women in our society? So he want to start that, okay, the man and woman, they perform several tasks in our society. Men, they have to perform the majority of the time the duty. These are the perfect, mean a person perfect in language may be speaking like this, but in our routine speech we are not speaking like this. We try to take pauses, the extra pauses. We try to mix up words. We think and then we speak. So the things are changed. I think both have duties. Man, there are a lot of things that I think they do at outside home. This is the way. Usually you will observe the speech pattern. So the issue with this side discourses also is that we cannot talk about discourse totally as structure. Okay, because if something is not a perfect sentence, or if something is perfectly a sentence without a meaning, how you can take it as discourse and how you can analyze such structures. So discourse is not only structure, it is a structure. Mean discourse, we need to take it as structure, but not independently discourse as a structure. But at the same time, we have to take into account the functions that discourse performs. So, and again, the functions, they cannot be taken as individually. Both structures and functions of discourses, they formulate a perfect discourse for the analysis. And if we only focus on the function, that okay, discourse is a system of function. For example, what is the time? If somebody asks you what is the time, now there can be many functions behind that, depending upon the context. There can be a phatic function. If you remember, Roman Jacobson presented this idea of communicative function. According to him, the language performs a phatic function when we just want to open a contact, just want to get an interaction with the other person, just for a normal chit chat. No basic function behind it, but just to get a interaction, to get a flow of contact, that is phatic function. So maybe to get an interaction with a person is standing there, I want to talk to him or her. So I will use this sentence as a tool to start this conversation. What's the time? Or it can have an emotive function, conveys the needs of the speaker. I am getting very much late. I have to submit my assignment. I'm constantly asking, what's the time? So now this is another emotive function that is performed by the language. Then the language, this discourse can have a cognitive function. For example, asking something to the addressee. That there is a speaker, there is a listener. The speaker is saying something and asking something from the listener. What I want to know the time. I want the listener to respond. So this is called cognitive function. And then we can have a referential function that makes reference to the world outside the language. What's the time? The time is running. The time is running away. I mean ambiguous type of meaning. I'm using the word time, that life is very short, that our life is going fast, and these things. So just providing a reference to the world. This is a referential function. Now, one sentence having so many functions. The problemarized discourse analysis may turn into a more general and broader analysis of language function. If I just convey, if I just pick only to take a sentence and communicate 2-3 functions, then that analysis would be so general, would be so problematic. So to conclude with the first definition, that we need to take discourse as a structure plus as a function to analyze it. But still we need to we will encounter certain problems that we should take into mind. Second definitions of discourse. What is this? What this definition says? Discourse is something that is present in the written and spoken form of language. The speaker or writer, speaker in the oral language, writer in the written language, says something that is a discourse, and hearer receives that language in oral form, or the reader receives that language in written form. So the between the speaker and listener, between the writer and the reader, the discourse is there. So discourse has a proper context. Discourse actually lies within the context. This is how the second definition of discourse takes discourse into account as both written and verbal form, and they take this discourse in association with a context. So what are the objects of discourse? According to this definition, discourse refers to any utterance which is meaningful. These texts can be written texts, these texts can be oral texts, these texts can be mixed, oral plus written form, and discourse does not depend on the size of a text. Again, even a single word can be the focus of my discourse analysis, and even the big paragraphs, the whole essay can be the subject of my discourse analysis. So in discourse analysis, you cannot talk about the size of the text, that I need to take this much length of the text in order to perform analysis. No. Any text of any length you can take it for analyzing. Even a single word text you can take it. As you know, within word we have so many meaning. So you can have in other words, analysis can be performed. The discourse analysis can be performed at various level. It can be performed at word level, it can be performed at phrase level, at clause level, at sentence level, or even as a theme level. We can perform these discourse analysis. What is required is that discourse, and discourse can be in any form, in any mode. It is written, spoken, anything. Then we have a third definition of discourse. According to it, a discourse is a set of terms, metaphors, allusions, ways of talking, references, and so on, which constitutes an object. If we want to take in discourse analysis an object, a language as an object, then that language can have anything inside it. In spoken and written forms, yes, you can have so many things within the language. The normal sentences, the metaphors, the allusions, the ways of talking, the way, even when you are analyzing the oral discourse, you would be also interested in the ways the speaker and the listener, they are talking, they are communicating to each other. So all these things, they can be known as, they can be regarded as discourse for performing discourse analysis. And further, the second part of this definition says that a to and fro of exchanges in talk or text that perform social action. Again, the idea that over here is of the social function. Any sort of text, whether it is written, whether it is in oral form, if it performs certain social functions, if it transfers as a certain amount of information, or anything happens because of that text or piece of language can be taken as discourse. Now, after what discourse is, now once you know that what discourse is, when I am going to perform discourse analysis, set parameters for yourself that what are the things that I am going to take discourse. And once you are finished, okay, this is this piece of text, or this particular means speech or any communication happen between the listener and speaker, this thing is happening, is serving as my discourse, as my text. Now the next step comes of doing discourse analysis, when you have to perform this discourse analysis. So now the doing discourse analysis, I have divided into three parts of doing discourse analysis, as having what is the scope of doing discourse analysis, mean why we should do discourse analysis, what are its influences, and what are the different approaches that are available to perform this discourse analysis. So let's start with the scope of doing discourse analysis. The scope of discourse analysis is that discourse analysis is actually not a discipline which exists on its own. Definitely it is actually just a field within the linguistics, and not only in the linguistics but also in literature as well. It is just a technique, it is not a discipline. So it does not exist in its own. It is influenced, but on the other side it is influenced by other disciplines, and as a return it influences them as well. So it is a two-way process. Mean it is not itself a discipline, it is just a way of doing thing. And that action of doing analysis, discourse analysis, you can take it with any discipline. You can perform a discourse analysis in sociolinguistics, you can perform a discourse analysis in literature, piece of text, you can perform discourse analysis in anthropology. You can take a discourse analysis as a tool to perform this analysis in any discipline. And as a result, when you will perform that discourse analysis, it is going to affect that discipline, because it would add a certain amount of knowledge to that discipline. By analyzing a piece of text, written or spoken, inside a discipline, I would come up with certain judgments, I would come up with certain conclusions, and that my conclusions, my judgments, my results of analysis would be adding information to that discipline. So a two-way process. Analysis used as a tool in certain discipline, and as a result then of the analysis, it is going to add something into that discipline. So two ways process. And again, the nature of the discipline also would affect the discourse analysis. It depends upon it also depends on the type of discipline you are interested in to perform that discourse analysis. Secondly, for this reason, discourse analysis examines spoken and written text from all sorts of different areas. Mean you can have a discourse analysis of a medical statement. Open a new bottle of medicine and you will find a whole set of leaflet with it, with the whole set of instructions and administrations and the whole history that medicine would be given. A person interested in discourse analysis can take it as a text and can perform a discourse analysis. So this technique of discourse analysis can be performed in any field. Even the legal documents, they can be analyzed, their language can be analyzed. The language of the advertisement, as you know, nowadays it is very common trend that the language of the advertisement, it is being analyzed for different reasons, for different issues, like gender and language is one issue for which these advertisements are focused, or to see what are the argumentative techniques that advertisements use to attract audience. That can be an analysis, a discourse analysis of advertisement. So any piece of text, written or spoken, belonging to any discipline can be used to analyze discourse, and from all sorts of perspective. Mean again, not only the text can be belongs to a variety of sources, but also your technique can be, your focus on that text can be from any perspective. Discourse analysis does not have a fixed perspective. It depends upon the user of that technique, discourse analysis technique, that what he wants to see inside a text. And whatever he wants to see inside that text, he can perform a discourse analysis with according to his perspective. As I have just mentioned, that language and gender is a common issue in advertisement. So any person who wants to see that what kind of language is used for depicting gender in advertisements can perform a discourse analysis. or power relationships is an also important thing in editorials of newspapers. Especially in editorial, what happens, the writers of editorial, they use certain persuasive techniques to convince the readers. They use the skills that unconsciously tempt the readers to certain things. They make readers of the newspapers to believe something. So this way they use certain technique. So I want to see what are the power tools, what are the power tools that these writers of these editorials, they use to influence the psyche of the reader. So this way the text discourse analysis is a multidisciplinary tool. It can be used in any discipline. At the same time, it is multi-angle tool. You can use it with any perspective, with any angle to perform an analysis of the text. It all depends on your need. It all depends on the need of the researcher. And that's why discourse analysis is becoming a very important tool in conducting research. That the people, they are interested in doing discourse analysis of certain speeches or text for children or the newspapers or advertisement, because this technique helps them to learn about this thing in detail. And again, this technique gives them an open choice to perform the analysis. Then discourse analysis has a number of practical applications. What are the applications where this discourse, when we perform this discourse analysis, where we can use these results of our analysis? For example, in analyzing communication problems in medicine. For example, in medicine field, we see that often there are communication problems. That the chemist that cannot communicate the exact description of their medicine to the doctor. That I'm just taking about the example. So what the doctor or the researchers, medical researchers, they can do, they can perform the discourse analysis of the all the material that is provided by the chemist, and then they can communicate the message. They can solve the problem. They can fill that gap that lies between the knowledge of the doctor and knowledge of a chemist. So this way discourse analysis become potentially helpful. Then in education, I can perform a discourse analysis. For example, nowadays the gender is becoming the hot issue. So I want to see the texts that are communicated to children, the texts that are taught to children, what kind of patterns they are, the teachers, the publishers of these textbooks, the writers of these textbooks, they use different strategies to communicate about their ideas. They convey their messages with the help of different techniques. So discourse analysis would help me to learn about those techniques, and not only would help me to learn about those techniques, but at the same time it would add information. What sort of information that would be? It would add information, it would increase my information level about that techniques, about that procedures that these researchers or publishers or these writers, they use. So again, the discourse analysis, it has practical applications in the field of education. Similarly, in analyzing written style, as I told you that especially the newspapers in editorials, they use very persuasive language and style to communicate their ideas, and they make unconsciously readers convinced of their ideas. So by performing the analysis of these editorials, I can make a judgment, okay, what are the techniques which are used by these writers. And if I want to become a journalist myself, I'm going to use, by analyzing these discourses, I'm going to use these same techniques to write my own editorials, to write something creatively which is related to these things. So this way, and not only in one field of medicine, education, and media, but in a variety of disciplines, this language discourse analysis can be used to perform several functions. So this is the scope of discourse analysis. Now, influences on discourse analysis. What are the different influences? Yes, on discourse analysis, the one thing is that you have the influence of sociolinguistics. Look at the one corner. Sociolinguistics, it is a subject in linguistics that studies the relationship between society and language. So sociolinguistics has an influence. Whatever the knowledge is there in sociolinguistics, it is going to influence the discourse analysis. Then there are computational linguistics. They are going to add. Then there are the non-linguistic disciplines which are not linguistics. For example, the study of mathematics, statistics, physics, they are not directly the linguistic subject, but still they are going to influence discourse analysis when you are performing discourse analysis in these disciplines. Similarly, psycholinguistics, the study of language and mind. The study of language and how the mind works to produce language, what are the different issues with them, that also affects the discourse analysis. Pragmatics, what is pragmatics? Yes, the study of intended meanings of speaker. They also intend to discourse analysis, influence discourse analysis, and all the linguistic disciplines. You know, as in linguistics we have a variety of subjects. We like sociolinguistics, psycho, computational linguistics, and pragmatics. These are some major branches. But at the same time, we have applied linguistics, we have neurolinguistics, we have so many other disciplines as well in linguistics, and all of these disciplines they affect discourse analysis procedure. And when you perform a discourse analysis in any discipline, you use the approaches within that discipline to perform that discourse analysis. So we will now talk about approaches to discourse. Deborah Schifrin, he in his book 1994 Approaches to Discourse, he pointed out 6 major approaches to discourse. These 6 approaches, they help us to perform discourse analysis actually. Now I would again like to mention over here some of the aspects of discourse analysis we have already done with in pragmatics second lecture, pragmatics and discourse analysis. But over there our discourse analysis focus was with respect to, most of the time with respect to pragmatics, some features of the text which make discourse, like the cohesion factor we have studied, and the different factors we have studied that create a structure of the discourse as well as create the functions within the discourse. So when you are studying this, preparing for this topic discourse analysis, do add that previous information on discourse analysis as well. So overall you will get a better understanding of what discourse analysis is, how it is conducted. So let's see, now we will discuss all of these 6 approaches one by one. And namely, these 6 approaches are the speech act approach. Do you have any idea of this? You should have. Again, refer back to pragmatics lecture. Interaction sociolinguistics, ethnography of communication, pragmatic approach, conversation analysis, and variationist approach. All of these approaches, they are used in to perform discourse analysis. Now let's discuss these one by one. The first approach toward the discourse analysis is that the speech act approach. Now if you remember, in pragmatics we have studied in detail what is a speech act theory proposed by John Austin and John Searle. These were the 2 originators of speech act theory. According to them, we use language to do certain things. We use language to perform several activities. Language is not just a piece of information that is provided from one person to another. So most of the times we use language to perform several functions, either verbally or physically. For example, if I say to you, close the door, now I am not providing you with any piece of information. I want you to actually perform this action. Go and close the door. So this is speech act. Then when I am making a request, please can you pass me some salt? Now I am not making a statement to you. I am asking you to pass me the salt. Again, I want you to do something physically. Or even the verbal actions can be there. What is the time? Now the purpose of this question is that you should respond to me verbally. You should tell me the time. So this was what was speech act theory, that the language, it is not just used for making statements or for certain other purposes, but majority language in action is used when we to do several things. That was the basic idea behind the speech acts. Like, for example, another the example that I have provided over here: speak louder. I'm not getting you, please speak louder. So what I mean, I'm giving a direction to the speaker that because I'm unable to hear to you, you should speak louder. I'm not asking him to listen to me. I'm just asking him to perform that action, to start speaking loud. Then Oxford Street is a shopper's paradise. Now this is not a speech act, because when I say that Oxford Street is a shopper's paradise, I am just conveying a piece of information, assertive, not making a speech. So which one of these two sentences belongs to speech act? Number one. Very good. The first sentence, because it demands certain certain physical action or verbal action, so this is the speech act. Although speech act theory was not first developed as means of analyzing discourse, particular issues in speech act theory like indirect speech acts, multiple functions of utterances, leads to discourse analysis. In beginning, when Austin and Searle, they introduced this speech act theory, this theory was just considered to analyze, considered as a tool to explain certain phenomena in language. But later on, it was realized by linguistics and researchers that we can use this speech act theory to analyze discourse. Because with the help of this discourse, for example, if I perform a discourse analysis on a piece of text, I can underline, okay, over here the person, this is the direct speech action over here. This sentence is indirect speech action. This statement, it does not require any speech action. So this way I can analyze a piece of text with the help of speech act theory. Then the second approach to discourse is interactional sociolinguistics. Within, what is sociolinguistics? The connection between language and society. And what is interactional sociolinguistics? That within a society, when we use language to communicate, to interact with each other. That is what is meant by interactional sociolinguistics. That and what it does, it represents the combination of three disciplines: anthropology, sociology, and linguistics. Sociology, study of society; anthropology, study of culture; linguistics, study of language. All three disciplines combined together, study of language of a culture or a society, that makes interactional sociolinguistics. And the basic focus of this interactional sociolinguistics is that how people from different cultures, they share their grammatical knowledge of a language, but contextualize what is said differently to produce different messages. Yes, to say same thing, I can communicate a single thing in different ways, and at the same time I can say only one single thing, but I mean two different things. So this way, the language, it works within a society, within a culture. And analyzing a piece of text, whether spoken or written, with perspectives of sociolinguistics would give you a discourse analysis with sociolinguistic perspective. For example, now look at the sentence: yeah, bring them down here, I will flog them for you. Now, the word flog that I have highlighted over here, that is typically used in Australian English. Now, by seeing this piece of utterance in a text or in a discourse, I can judge that, okay, the person, the society to which this text belongs is Australian society. This discourse, this piece of text reflects Australian culture, Australian society. So this way, the language, it represents a specific culture, it represents a society. And when I analyze a piece of text to see that the language of the text, that written or spoken, whatever form is there, that language of that text reflects what society, what culture. That is the interactional, that is approach with respect to interactional sociolinguistics. Then other approach towards this discourse is that of ethnography of communication. What do you get by the word ethnography? Ethno is a word, Greek word, which means culture. So now you can make a meaning of ethnography? Yes, ethnography is study of culture, and the ethnography of communication is that about a communicative discourse, you tell about the speaker's culture. For example, if I would write a piece of text, or if I would talk about any tradition, anything about in my culture, then the words, my vocabulary I would be using would specifically reflecting my society. For example, somebody asked me to talk about the marriage as an act in your society, then what words I will use in that piece of discourse? I would be typically using the words like dulha, dulhan, mayu, mehndi, walima. I would be talking about this upton thing and dholki. So many these things would be there. So many words would be there in my discourse, whether in written or spoken form, that would tell the other person that okay, the writer of this text or the speaker of this text belongs to this culture. So this way you can analyze a discourse with respect to ethnography of communication, because usually it happens that the way we communicate depends a lot on our culture we come from. Let me, if you read these two examples, these are some stereotypical examples. Now, just about this is not example from my own society. I have given you orally my example from my own society, but look at these two specific examples. One example is about Finnish people. These Finnish people, the people living in Finland. Finland is a country. These people, they are the hardest nation for communication. Quiet and serious. They, most of the time, if you try to communicate with them, they would be just responding you following that maximum of quantity, just to the point they will answer you. Most of the time they remain quiet, silent and serious. So they are the hardest nation on the earth to communicate with. You hardly can communicate with them. So a piece of text from a Finn person, I can, few utterances would be there, few lines would be there to talk about a certain thing, because they do not like to communicate much. So I can analyze, okay, this piece of text comes from a Finnish origin. Look at the serious tone. Look at the lack of words there. Look at the serious look at the quantity of matter. So these things, they can help me to analyze a text. Then, for example, the Turkish people, very talkative and friendly. If you take a piece of conversation, the oral conversation from Turkish origin, or a piece of written text from a Turkish origin, you will see the tone would be very friendly. The people, they love to talk. The Turkish people, they love to talk, they love to communicate, just opposite to Finnish people. So their language would reflect that aspect of their culture. So this way the language, it reflects a culture. Just like the interactional sociolinguistics, this ethnography of communication and the interactional sociolinguistics, they almost overlap in their approach, because both of them, they reflect a particular society or particular culture. So analyzing a piece of discourse from the perspective of, to see that to what origin, to what culture a person, a speaker, a writer belongs to, is known as discourse analysis with perspectives of the ethnography of communication. Then we have the pragmatics as an approach towards discourse. And if you remember Paul Grice, the maxims of conversation, we have studied them in detail. There were 4 maxims of conversation: maxim of quantity, maxim of quality, maxim of relevance, and maxim of relevance, quality, quantity, and I'm not getting exactly, you can't recall the final maxim, but let me with the passage of time. I mean, just sometimes the words this just skip out of mind. So excuse me, but that principle that Paul Grice presented with 4 cooperation principles, that while communicating, while conversing with each other, how we tend to cooperate with each other. And when we take a piece of discourse and study that how these 4 maxims they are followed in that piece of text, whether written or oral, if that maxims are followed or not followed, the study with this perspective would be my discourse analysis with respect to pragmatics. Because because we cannot say that the people they would be following it or would not be following it. People interact by using minimal interactions about one another. They tend to, when they interact each other, they try to talk less about others and then more about themselves. So if you want to analyze a piece of text, to see that how the people they are using these cooperation principles, or they are avoiding, or maybe they are just refuting, neglecting these maxims of cooperation. So a discourse analysis with this perspective would fall into the category of pragmatics. Then we have another type of discourse analysis, that is with respect to conversational analysis. What does it mean? Look at the example now. Person A: this is Mr. Smith, may I help you? B: I can't hear you. B: this is Mr. Smith. B: Smith. So mean this is a conversation. This is a piece of conversation. So conversational analysis, instead of just writing a piece of text like a written essay or a written informative essay or a narrative essay or a story or a prose or a poetry, I'm not talking about them, not talking about that text. I'm talking the text now, the conversation as text. Now that text can be, yes, definitely the conversation can be provided to me in written form, or conversation can be provided to me in recorded form, whatever form. Okay, but that conversation, when I am focusing my discourse analysis only and only focusing the conversation, then this analysis is known as the conversational analysis. And it is particularly interested in sequences of utterances, that is not in what people say but in how they say it. Whether focus the word conversation, whether or not the people they are following the conversational rules. Do you have some idea about the conversation rules? Yes, person A asks something, so person B needs to respond. Taking turns, one by one person speaks, then the other person speaks. Talking about the ideas, if person A is talking about something, the person B need to talk about that thing. So there are certain conversational techniques that we follow in our life. There are certain techniques that are used in this while conversing with each other. So analyzing a conversation to see for these things, that how the people they converse. No, they are not interested in the subject matter, that what are the things they converse about. Instead of that, how they converse, that is the focus of attention in conversational analysis. So now to summarize all these approaches to discourse, what are the approaches? There was conversational analysis and variationist analysis, which falls into the category of structural approaches, and whereas the speech acts like ethnography of communication, interactional sociolinguistics and pragmatics, they fall into the category of to see discourse as with respect to their functions that they perform. And then the different aspects of these tables what are the focus of research while doing these types of analysis, and what are the research questions that are formulated. So that's about what are the different approaches to do the discourse analysis. Now let's do certain discourse analysis. How to actually do this discourse analysis? Let's explain it with the help of certain examples. Various ways, again, various disciplines, various ways. You can choose any topic, any discipline, belonging to any discipline for discourse analysis. And at the same time, you can focus that piece of text from any angle you want to focus it. So various variety of ways are there to perform this discourse analysis. but usually we divide them into two categories of that we do this discourse analysis constituting an object or realizing a social action. So these two perspectives emerge. Now let's see what is meant by constituting an object. By constituting an object means that there are certain cultural objects like marriage, crime, obesity. So what we do, we collect data from any source. For example, my topic is to see marriage or crime or obesity problem. In certain top cultural topics I would take, and then I would take any text, any piece of text from that culture, like media text can be one example for such things. In media I can take a news report, or I can take a magazine article, or can take a newspaper feature. Anything I will pick from media text, or some personal accounts. A personal account of a person who faced this problem of obesity, or an interview with a person who was engaged in marriage, or a personal interview with a criminal, or a diaries of a person. Anything, any sort of text you take a theme, a cultural theme, choose any piece of text from that culture, either a media text or a personal account, and then analyze it. Then analyze that theme or that perspective out of that discourse. To show that more clearly, look at this, and this is a media report. This is a news report actually. The title is "Bush shows all Europe a new face of caring and sharing." Now if you look at this, if you read this article in detail, so you will find certain pieces of information. To perform a discourse analysis on this piece of text, what I will do, now look at, I will choose the text and I will highlight the thing. President Bush sought to repair his tattered reputation. Now I have highlighted the word tattered. Assume it is tattered. Underlined it. In Europe yesterday, talking of his deep desire to close the Guantanamo Bay prison camp and conceding that his response to the 9/11 terrorist attacks had not been understood by much of the continent. Now compare expressing his deep desire. What? Number one, he wants to express his deep desire. This is another perspective from the text. Third perspective is that assumes that he was not understood properly by the people, that the people they mistook him, they misunderstood him on his ideas on after his views on 9/11. So this is the way that from a piece of text I highlight the major points of the text. Now over here, if you look at the taken out portion, my perspective is to analyze this news report to see how the information has been arranged in it. But you can analyze the same piece of text with a different perspective. It all depends on you, what you want to see, what you want to analyze. The second, as I told you, that language, when we do analysis, then the one area is that choose as subject, you take object, and the second is that discourse as language interaction. Language interactions come through a sequence in turns. Each turn has an implication for the next. As I told you that in conversing with each other, we have very much this idea of turn taking. An exemplary analysis, again, the doctors delivering diagnosis. There is a doctor, when they deliver diagnosis report to their patients, do they tell the patients immediately? Now we will analyze. We will collect certain piece of oral communication between doctor and patients after the doctor delivers the diagnosis report. We will collect all that pieces of communication, we will bring at home and we will analyze them. So let's see, I have chosen one piece of text. This is from Menon, 2004, page number 63. It was mentioned. Dr. Y. From the test results 0.3, he seems to function comfortably, and achieve some kind of, happy and responsive. Mrs. R. Yes, Dr. Y. On the level of about, 3.5-year-old child. Now the other person, Now the first thing, what the doctor is doing over here, he is describing the test results. So he is telling the test results to the patient or the patient relatives, that what is the result of the test. Then further, Doctor, I feel very strongly that because he tests some kind functions between mildly retarded and border level, needs special class placement. Mrs. R mean again, doctor. Yeah, the class for the for educable mentally retarded will be best for his functioning, and emotionally will still not ready enough to be more. Mrs. Then you are trying to tell me that you feel slightly mentally retarded? Doctor, yes. Now what are the things you observe from this? From sentence 1, from line 1 to line 8, what the doctor is doing? The doctor, he told about the medical reports, and then directly from the test he moves to the treatment part. Instead of discussing further the results, detail, the different possibilities and so many things, from directly he moves from test to treatment process without any providing an explanation for diagnosis. So this is the way that I can collect certain pieces of text, and I can by judging them I would accomplish a report that okay, the doctors, they usually in their after the test they usually diagnose, they present a brief introduction to the report, and then they directly come to the treatment process. So this can be my observation after the discourse analysis. Now what does this result first practice achieve? Gives patient the sight of evidence, shows that the diagnosis when given is well founded, allows the patient to guess or predict what is to come, and allows them to voice it themselves. They understand, they get understanding of what has happened, what is the problem with them. So this discourse analysis this discourse is communicating all these things. So the discourse analysis would help us to understand these communication between a patient and a doctor. But again we have some objections, some worries. It's not quantitative, so is it subjective? Because usually in discourse analysis we do not get quantitative data. Sometimes we do get, but most of the time we are unable to get any quantitative data. So as the quantitative data, qualitative data is known as subjective data. So should we call this data that we have collected through the discourse analysis as subjective data? Not particularly. Argument still has to convince readers, editors that by appeal to establish findings and theory. Because again, though we do not get any data, quantitative data, but the reports and the other things, they are very much genuine. They do not make it subjective. Rather, it still remains a objective type of analysis. Is it useful? Yes, the discourse analysis is useful because it reveals how objects get constituted and unmasks the interest that serves, and shows how the mundane interaction achieves its business. How with the help of interaction we achieve our goals. We determine what we get, what we want to get. So this is again a summarized form. What actions are to be revealed, what is the candidate theory method that is used, and what is the typical data for every type of analysis. For example, if you are a personal meaning making discourse analysis, then usually that personal meaning discourse analysis would be having the narrative analysis as a method, or interpretive analysis as a method, or phenomenological method as analysis. Or so these types of analysis you can use. And what would be the data? The interviews, diaries, autobiographies and stories. So this table gives you a whole detail, that for different levels what would be the discourse, what would be the text or discourse, what would be the techniques that would be used to analyze discourse. And it all depends on the first part, or the first column of the table that tells that what is actually what you want to get. It all depends on your scope, what you want to reveal. And after what you want to do, after that you can pick an appropriate strategy for your discourse analysis. So why you shouldn't do discourse analysis? The recording of the data isn't always easy. Why you shouldn't do discourse analysis? It does not mean at all that I'm suggesting you not to do discourse analysis. It is very helpful, but there are certain problems. Yes, we need to see that there are the certain problems that arises, and because of that usually the researchers, they try to avoid it. Number one, the recording of the data is very difficult task. The data transcribing is a very laborious task, and then master of getting the art, becoming the master of the craft of explicating what's going on without over interpreting it or merely describing it is very hard. You need to get the mastery of art of interpretation. Do not over-interpret it or do not simply describe it. Interpretation at a medium level, and you won't come away with a demonstration that X caused Y. You will not get it very easily that X caused Y, or a survey of the indicates that A is X and Y, population, etc. Means so many problems are there which are there in discourse analysis when you conduct discourse analysis. But you should do discourse analysis. Why? Because this analysis, this discourse analysis, you become close to the data. Again, there are so many techniques for analysis of text are available. But why to prefer discourse analysis? Because with discourse analysis, you get into the data. The data are of life as it's lived. Consider that data as a lively thing. So you will get more meaning out of it. You uncover the subtle organization of language. You know, language is a very powerful medium to convey certain ideas directly or indirectly. If you are just analyzing a text without focusing on language issues, then you won't get the whole interpretation of the text, because some things, the things are said openly or covertly within that language of the text, and you need to analyze it, and you need to get those meanings. And finally, you plug into social practices that at the grandest constitute reality and are in place in it. This interpretation art would let you to interpret the world around you, to interpret reality for you. So you will become more realist after learning this technique of discourse analysis. Other reasons why discourse analysis might interest you, it might be connected to your life, maybe. If you are performing a discourse analysis to the thing that are related to your job, so you will get a more understanding of that thing. It can go on your CV, that art, mastering of that art can be specifically mentioned in your CV. If you get interested in the subject, you might want to take it further. The future studies options are open, and so it's worth starting to think about what you are interested in. Think about your interests and then start doing those things. So to recap it quickly, because of the shortage of time, today we talked about discourse analysis in detail. What is discourse? How it is defined in different ways. Then we talked about doing discourse analysis, and in doing discourse analysis we were concerned with its scopes, influences, and the approaches that can be adopted to do this discourse analysis. And with the help of practical examples, I showed you how to analyze the discourses of the text or of in both spoken and written form. So that was all for today. So see you inshallah soon. Then Allah Hafiz.